once again. We stand together, we'll stand till the end. Through all the pain, I know this is worth dying for.
War.
We're unified with your light, we can shine in the dark. You gave me a reason to fight for the truth, not just for us, but for others abused. We will defend and defenseless as the rain pours. We are the sword. As one blood, we will fight. We will make it out. Losing better, we will battle till the morning sun will rise. We are the sword.
War.
Gave me a reason to fight once again. We're on the front line, still marching ahead.
Love.
Gave me a reason to survive anyway. You gave us a reason to fight.
War. War.
Hello, everyone. If you're watching this and you made your way to the Procedurally Barred YouTube channel, I'm your host, Obi-Wan Benobi, and my confident in crime-fighting, overweight, sweaty prosecutors is Emma, who also happens to be a mad genius putting together presentations. Emma?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we've been working in Making a Murderer for years between us, and thought we'd branch out and do our own thing for a bit.
Tonight we've put a little something together for you. It might pique everyone's interest in the case. Numerous people have debated recently on the findings of one dirty, tannish, khaki Budweiser sweater. Is it paint or is it really blood? Lucky for me, I've come to the conclusion that I've been right all along. You'll see that I was in fact right by calling it blood. Unfortunately, this has caused such a heated debate by me and other members of the TTM subreddit and other members of the community. But anywho, we're going to be talking about two specific pieces of evidence in general. Em?
We also wanted to look at the what it means if the jumper is blood and the potential value it has towards the case. And we're looking at whether it would constitute Brady and Youngblood violations.
So, one of which was completely hidden from the defense, kept at a trial, and not typically collected under the same standard of practice one would expect from law enforcement. No photographic evidence, no item tag number, no data entry or cataloging, nor would have it been handled properly by the requirements that one would constitute as being acceptable. As for the other piece of evidence, there is no record of blood being mentioned or properly tested under which that would be acceptable under the color law. It was lied about at trial. it was twisted, manipulated to fit the prosecutor's narrative, in which its physical properties have changed about 3 times to the point at trial. But I would like to thank you guys for joining us tonight. Shall we get into this, Emma?
Yep, let's have a listen to this. Do you want to explain this before we play, or?
This is a phone conversation between Poggle, Jerry Poggle, and I believe it's Remaker. I can't really be too sure. I'm not really keen on, other people's voices, but Poggle, he's mentioned in this. But this is 11/10/05, and they are talking about. This is right after Stephen Avery was arrested, so they've already found the key. They already have the RAV4, and there's something that's mentioned being found on one specific piece of item collected, which was the key, and the state's narrative completely contradicts what's being said here. But you can go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah, that's your case, huh? We got her. Cool. Man, oh man, we've been waiting for this all day. Cool. So what Brett just told me, they found his blood, verified his blood in the car and also on the key, huh? Also on the key, vehicle, he says he's never been in. Cool. Cool, great. Yeah. This is fantastic news. Good. Hey, all paid off. One thing I got to ask you here quickly, that skid steer, do we still need to take that down to Madison tomorrow or not? No, it's changed. What we'll do is collect it, and we're going to bring it back to the sheriff's department. We need to store it somewhere. Well, apparently we're storing the vehicles in storage sheds. We might as well just put that in with them, right? No, we can't have them together. Okay. They have to be separate because of the possibility of contamination. How about in separate units? We can't have the two vehicles together. We got to have separate units for all of them. Okay. Well, instead of renting, why don't we just get the vehicles tomorrow? Yeah, I'm planning on doing that tomorrow afternoon. And then we'll see tomorrow what the plan is on those other vehicles, the Fister and the golf cart. Oh, okay. So there's 2 units out there. Yes. We got the Fister. Okay. Well, we can work on that during the day. Yeah. You can let me know. As long as we've got somebody going down and getting those vehicles out, I guess they're short of space. Yeah. Chris, Wendorf and Kaharski are going to go down tomorrow afternoon, either at noon or 1 o'clock, depending on when Dan can work things out at home. Okay. And then we've got in my understanding, the rental units are coming from Denise. Yeah, Denise says we can use those. Okay. She's given us okay on that. Okay. And we need to lock them up. Yep. The padlocks are down there. Okay. All righty. We'll take care of that. Yep. Okay. That sounds fantastic. Anything else? No. I can't think of anything else. We'll be going out and continuing to search the tip tomorrow. Right. You found bones and body parts? Yes, a lot more. Yeah. Just so you're aware, I don't know if Brett briefed you, I put in calls to Outagamie. They're going to supply us with 2 guys tonight, 2 guys tomorrow. Okay. Sheboygan Sheriff is supplying us 1 tonight, 1 tomorrow. Okay. Brown is supplying 3 tonight and 2 tomorrow, but Brown indicated they were going to be charging us, and tomorrow's a holiday for them. Oh, it is? It's Veterans Day. But as a veteran, it really should be a holiday. Just for veterans, at least. Yeah. But I told Brett he should review his staffing for tomorrow, and if he can cut out those 2 guys from Brown for tomorrow, because I'm sure those guys would be at triple time. So. Okay, yes. Yeah. So we should be okay tonight, according to Brett, and tomorrow he sounded somewhat hopeful that he could get his It's on lines pulled back tomorrow, so. Yeah, okay. Great. Okay. Have a great night, Jerry. Thanks for everything you've been doing. Okay. You too. Okay. Take care. Bye.
County County Sheriff's Department.
Hi, it's me, Jerry.
Hi, Jerry.
I just want to give you some information, okay?
Okay. Yes,
Stephen,
it's okay. Paul needs to talk to you too.
okay, just to let everybody know, Stephen Avery's blood was found in her vehicle.
That's what Paul just came in and told me.
Okay, yep. Fantastic, and blood was also found on her key.
Oh my gosh.
It's made up.
Oh,
Fantastic.
good job.
Let me talk to Paul.
Okay.
So, as veterans, you would expect law enforcement to have some type of honor and integrity, You have Geraldine Poggle stating that there was blood found in the RAV4 and on the key, even validating it again, and then counting the two other people that he basically told, which would have been the person that was on the female on the next call, and he was asking to speak to someone else. So you can pretty much guarantee he told two other people, but he clarifies it not once but twice, three times actually, in these phone calls where he's stating that there's blood on this key. Um, uh, if the Wisconsin State Crime Lab had properly tested this and told Kenneth Kratz during trial, well, there was sweat DNA or the transferring of Stephen's blood or skin cells. His skin cells were transferred from his hand onto the key. They don't mention anything about blood whatsoever. Even in the reports when the key was actually collected, you don't hear nobody mentioning anything about blood. You don't hear Kacharski, you don't hear Colburn or Link say anything about blood. It's not in their reports, and I'm sure, like, if there would have been blood that existed on that key at the time they found it and collected it, I'm sure, they would have said something. But the fact that they didn't and it was completely left out, there's no report of it. I mean, it says something to me, So what I did is I examined this key thoroughly. I have a program that allows me to, like, manipulate the lighting a little bit to try and bring out certain details that you normally wouldn't see with the naked eye, but they're within the photo itself. You can kind of, like, bring out these certain details sometimes that you normally wouldn't be able to see with the naked eye.
So you didn't do anything else to the pictures other than allow things that were there to be seen more clearly?
No, just change the lighting between, like, the saturation and the contrast. That's the only things that I kind of changed, because I could tell that there was something on the key that it just wasn't visible, So by changing the lighting and the certain textures around, I was able to basically see what is on the key. There's actually some type of substance formed to the key, that shouldn't be there.
Is that on the black bit on the lower left-hand picture? You can see sort of stains on the black element of the key.
Yes, on the locking mechanism on the fob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you actually look at it, if you have a high resolution photo or like a high def photo, you actually can tell like there's a foreign substance on that the end of the black fob, you know. But it's definitely there. You know, it's something I can't really be overlooked. You know, I mean, it's physically there. It's not like I added it there. You know, what I mean, I can't add anything. What's
Yeah.
there is there. But
I
I
think
mean,
I think for me, the bit that stands out to me is that this changes as the narrative builds, as the state's version of events builds. First of all, it's blood. Then it becomes sweat. And then it's referred to as non-blood DNA. So it's almost as if they can't make their mind up which form of DNA it is.
yes. Well, they also state that by Stephen Avery handling this key. Now we gotta remember. You know, I mean, the state's saying that no trace of traces on this key, none. There's no DNA. It's obviously not her blood, or else they would have used that against Stephen Avery at trial. But what the state contends is that by Stephen Avery handling this key, uh, he removed all trace evidence of Teresa off the key by touching it and replacing it with his own. Uh, and that just doesn't work for me. It doesn't.
No.
If that was Teresa's key, there should have been some type of sign to show that she actually handled that key at one point in time, you know. And I feel like this key really doesn't belong to her. I think that the Wisconsin State Crime Lab that they have in evidence uh, that they claim that they had cut. I think that that's Teresa's actual key. This key was the cut key, and therefore that's why you don't see Teresa's DNA on this key. You only see Stephen Avery's. And Stephen Avery's DNA, which you can get DNA from blood, but that was planted on the key to give it the appearance that he was somehow in contact with the RAV4 at some point in time. Or why else would he have a key that goes to her vehicle?
I think for me, the bit that stands out is when Culhane talks about the touch DNA and Stephen being what she refers to as a super shedder. From my understanding and from the research that I've done, that idea that some people shed in a way that could be described as super is a debunked myth. And if someone did shed slightly more DNA than someone else, that wouldn't remove or negate other DNA that was there. So that for me debunks the whole Stephen was some sort of super shedder that also could remove traces of anyone else's DNA.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they definitely, in some ways, the state really did change their narrative and blatantly misleading the jury. They lied, they altered, manipulated the reports in a manner that it hid the fact that the blood evidence existed on that key. Uh, uh, I don't know. To me, it feels like that's definitely not Teresa's key, and that the one that they have in that they had cut is Teresa's key. If I was Kathleen Zellner, I would definitely have that key tested as well. I'd have both of them keys tested.
Yeah, I think so too.
But yes, you can move on.
Okay.
This is like I guess side by side comparison. But when I'm looking at the fob, I'm looking at it in I see like 4 distinct spots on here where it kind of looks like fingerprints. You know what I mean? Like if he was to handle the key and had grasped it or held it in his hand and he had blood on his hands, he would have, you know what I mean, got. But to me, I kind of feel like law enforcement purposely planted that like that to make it look as if he actually handled the key. And the top photo is a photo that after they collected evidence from Stephen Avery's bedroom, they dismantled it, tore it apart, and they transferred much of what they found physical evidence on. They took it to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab. There they photographed it, and there's these 4 spots that are. They don't look like they're fingerprints. They look like they're like if something was watered down and you took a piece of fabric and you pressed it against there. That's kind of like what it looks like. I
It
think
doesn't look like
tried.
drops either. It
Yes,
doesn't look like droplets. It's not got the pattern that you would expect to see on wood of blood.
but this is
On rock.
underneath. This is underneath the backboard that goes to, you know what I mean, that presses up against the headboard of
Okay.
the bed. So
So we
it's
can
like
rule out it
underneath
being
it.
drops
So
then.
to me, I kind of feel like they put that there or placed it there to make it appear that Stephen Avery had moved his bedroom around and that his fingers grabbed underneath there to lift the bed up to move it, and therefore he like left these prints there. They don't look like prints to me. They look like they were like purposely placed there
And
by
with
pressing from like a like if you look at blood when it's diluted with water. I mean, if he was physically bleeding at the time, leaving bloody prints, I mean, you would expect that there would be a lot more blood there, but you don't see that. You see some type of like watered down blood stain. But
yeah, it doesn't appear to be fingerprint in nature, and it can't be a droplet because blood wouldn't gather there like that and not be anywhere else. It's quite random.
well, in my opinion, I feel like they couldn't use just regular fingers to do it because they would leave their own prints behind, but therefore they would use some type of fabric to leave it behind.
Yeah.
I mean,
So you're
obviously,
transferring
they
it from the fabric.
what's that?
So you're transferring it from the fabric onto the wood.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
But you can continue.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, these pictures here, the first picture on the left, this was taken in Stephen Avery's during the search. The middle picture and the one on the right were taken of Stephen in Crivets. Now we all know Stephen was arrested from Crivets, so there's this indicates that there is what looks like blood on multiple items of clothing, because the jeans that Avery had on in Crivets went with him to the police department, and the jeans on the left were already still in his trailer. So it looks like we got blood on multiple different items of clothing. And Ben, the picture on the left, you have altered to make the stains that were already there stand out more. Do you want to explain what you've done to that picture?
Yes, I changed the lighting around and I brightened up the image and zoomed in on the photos so we could clearly see what we couldn't because of the photos that they, uh, I guess, shared in a FOIA. They weren't really like high detailed. A lot of them were dim. but just by changing the lighting and making it brighter, I was able to get the stains that were actually on the jeans to stand out more. But as you can clearly see, while Stephen Avery was in Crivets, you know, I mean, he was obviously wearing a pair of jeans that had blood stains all over them. But I mean, there's two events that occurred here. There's one event where Stephen Avery broke his hand open initially, where he there's something with a trailer or a trailer hitch he was moving.
Lifting something, wasn't he, to do with
Yeah,
a trailer? And yeah.
yes. And then another time was right on November 5th, I believe. When he was up in Crivets, he was working on a roof, doing something with shingles and cutting chickens and stuff like that, where he broken open again. So, I mean, there's two separate events here, and you would expect him to have been wearing two separate, what do you want to say, like
Items of clothing and
items? Yeah.
yeah.
Two different outfits,
Okay.
which would have had blood stains on them, you know.
Okay. So multiple items of clothing with what very distinctly looked like blood on them.
And not to like poke fun, and you know what I mean, but members on a salvage yard, you know what I mean, they're not entirely clean all the time, you know. They work in them clothes on a daily basis. You would expect them to wear them like, I don't know, 2-3 days in a row, or maybe like longer than that sometimes, you know what I mean. They're obviously messing around with motor vehicle parts that are going to get their clothes dirty. Why, you know what I mean, waste a good pair of jeans? So you would expect them to be wearing the same clothes all the time, you know. So
Okay. And do you want to talk about this one?
yeah, I can barely see the stains, but I assure you that they're there. I mean, she's pointed several of them out. If you look at the photos, you can clearly tell that they're like almost a rusty color, like when blood dries, like when it first comes out, of course it's going to be like bright red, or it's going to have color to it, but the longer it sits and the longer it I don't know what you want to say,
Oxidizes.
decays, oxidizes, yes, it turns like a rustic brownish red color, like something very similar to rust, you know. And I don't know, like the way that he's sitting there, he's holding his hand, and I mean he's covering up his hand in a way, but it was his right hand, I believe, that was cut.
Yes, it was his right hand. And if he was injured, you know, he's going to be babying that hand and holding it. That's probably, it probably hurts, which is why he's holding it in the way that
Right.
he is. But it's possible. I mean, you know, Stephen Avery describes him as he wrapped some duct tape around it and carried on at one point. So he's clearly, you know, administering his own first aid, which means, you know, blood probably got on the other hand and he's wiped it on his trouser leg on the other side.
Yep, correct. I mean, yeah, if he's going to be bandaging that finger, and to try and stop the bleeding, you would expect him to have wrapped it, you know, and
Mm.
blood would transfer on to the opposite hand. So
Yeah.
okay, we can continue. Would you like to talk about this one?
I can do, yes. The picture on the left was from a FOIA release, and you can clearly see this is after the law enforcement have torn his room to shreds. This is the remnants of Stephen's room. The bed and a lot of the paneling and fixtures and fittings had been taken. You can clearly see there's a TV with a jumper folded on it. And the picture on the right is a zoom in of that same picture. You can see the jumper here. You can see staining on the jumper. And you can see the size of the stains. You can see the different patterns of stains on it.
I noticed that a lot of people in I guess different countries might call it something else. I mean, I've called it a sweatshirt. I've called it a sweater. You call it a jumper.
Yeah.
But what we see is there's visible stains on this sweater or jumper, and what really stands out to me is that anywhere you look in the items collected as evidence, this item is never mentioned. This article of clothing is never collected. There's nothing that would substantiate that it was ever even tested. Um, and it really stands out to me. It not only stands out to me that it's an item of clothing that has blood on it, but that it's sitting completely out in the open. Why isn't it deemed important enough to be tested or looked at or collected as evidence? That really bothers me.
This stands out to me just as much as the jeans do. Nothing with these stains on was taken as evidence, logged, tested. Nothing has been done in order to determine whether those stains are blood or paint. And that stands out quite a lot to me, because we know from other projects that we're working on that Manitowoc Police Department have previously accepted evidence claimed to be blood that they put in a report they believed to be paint. And even though they believed it to be paint, they took it, tagged it, and never tested it. But with the police being on a crime scene of this size, they had those instant tests that they could do to record whether it was blood or not. They don't record anywhere in CASO that they have carried out tests on any of these items, not the jeans on the bed with the stains on, and not this jumper. So either they did do the test and didn't record it, or they didn't do the test at all. Either way, that's bad investigation on their part.
Could you give us an example of what you're talking about, how law enforcement has collected evidence where they see stains and basically state that it's paint, but they end up collecting it as evidence anyway?
Yeah. In respect of Eva Berg and the statement she made about her husband, she approached Manitowoc Police Department with multiple items of evidence. Two of these items were gloves with what's described as red stains on, and a hammer with red stains on. These were accepted and taken from her by Manitowoc Police Department. They recorded in the official report taking those items that they believed it to be paint. They didn't decline to take the items. They didn't explain they believed it to be paint and wouldn't look into it any further. They took the items, bagged them, tagged them, and as far as we know, they're still sat there in the evidence room.
Thank you for that. So, is there anything particular about this item that you want to go on any further?
No, I think we'll leave the surprise for the next bit.
Well, I think the thing is this shirt or this sweater was in the same bedroom as the pants were. This was right before the pants actually existed, before the room had been tossed. And I actually believe that this photograph was taken. We said what it was. It was back in March, right?
Yeah.
So March of 2006. And there's something really strange here because they came back to Stephen Avery's after Brendan's confession and to look for further evidence. If this shirt had existed then, I believe that it was possibly taken when they decided to leave during the first initial searches of Stephen Avery's trailer. And I think that this is an important item that they wouldn't have left behind during those searches, but to come back and to have it completely out in the open the way that it is, there's no way that they overlooked this item. I mean, how could you overlook something like this? The first initial searches of Avery's trailer. It's just astonishing to me. There's videos of Tyson going in on the 6th, two separate. Well, there's actual several videos of it, but he goes in very earlier on in the morning. Do you remember around what time it was?
No, I don't remember the time offhand.
What
I
about
only know the
later on
details
that
about
night
these
when it was
pictures.
dark? It was like dark out.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the time. I've only got the time noted for the timestamps on these pictures. So,
Well, he comes in, they go into Avery's trailer, and it is completely dark outside. They don't flick on any lights or turn on any lights. They're actually using the camera light as they're recording to walk around and to see, you know. And at one time, they're walking down Avery's hall heading toward his bedroom, and one of the officers, Tom Fassbender, had dipped into the bathroom. It appeared that he was holding something in his hand, but he just nonchalantly dipped into the bathroom. And then the officer that was recording had played it off and basically walked into Avery's bedroom. And I really feel as though they came back to like plant evidence that they had seized the first time but didn't report it, but to plant it there and to make it appear as if it was there the entire time, and like later collected it, you know what I mean, and make it seem as they just had found it, you know. It's just I don't
we
know.
have got some photos backing that up, but we'll
Yes.
save that for a later date. But there are photos that provide proof to that. What the bit that's standing out to me though about the jumper is, for all the police know, that jumper contained a combination of Stephen and Teresa's blood. And I can imagine, you know, the joy on Kratz's face holding up this jumper in court and saying, we've got this jumper, it's got both Stephen and Teresa's DNA on it. I can't see why they would have neglected this item, considering Stephen was being charged with murder and they've got bloody items of clothing in his trailer that they're not looking into, but they have got, however, 7 bags of dog feces. It just doesn't make sense.
Yes, how would they be able to know for sure if that was Stephen Avery's blood on there or Teresa's blood on there? Like there would have been no way for them to have known that because they can't distinguish between someone's blood from someone else's. They don't have no test to prove that there on the spot. So, to me, I mean, it was deemed enough to well, I mean, reasonably, rationally, it should have been collected. I mean, they shouldn't have left something like that behind because I mean, it could have been either or's blood. I mean, it's just it's insane to me.
Yeah.
But we can move on.
Okay, so with the jeans and the jumper being there, both with similar red stains on, we were wondering, could this possibly have been the outfit that he was wearing when he originally cut his finger? We know the jeans there are not the ones that he was wearing in Crivets when he reopened the wound, but they could have been the ones that he'd worn. He said that he'd reopened the wound a few times, and to quote Stephen, it bled like a stuck pig when it reopened. And I think it's important to note the jumper and jeans in this slide and the trousers that Stephen was wearing in Crivets. All those 3 photos, they were taken around the same time. And like as we've said, we got really big questions here as to why none of these items were collected as evidence, submitted as evidence at trial, given an item number and given an evidence tag. When they've arrested Stephen under the suspicion of murder and he is wearing items of clothes that look like they have blood stains on them, you would log that and test it. And there's no record of any of that. So either it was tested and they're not disclosing the answers, or it was never tested.
Yeah, whatever happened. I mean, if Stephen was arrested, what happened to the pair of pants that he was wearing as he went into the prison? Like, would they have taken that had it had blood on it? Would they have taken that into evidence, or would they have shipped that back home?
You would think, given the fact we're talking about murder here and the state's narrative, according to Brendan Dassey's confession, was that Teresa had her throat cut, and here you've got someone arrested on the suspicion of murder with what appear to be bloodstains on their clothes, and they're not doing anything with those to try and identify if it is blood, and if it is blood, then whose.
Right.
That stands out as particularly weird. So was it blood or was it paint? The honest answer here is we don't know, because none of this was ever investigated. There was no scientific testing in any size, shape, or form carried out on any of these items. So maybe blood, maybe not.
Well, what if I can tell you that what we're seeing is blood? And what do you think that means? Or what would it mean? On November 9th, 2005, Stephen was taken into Aurora Medical Clinic where his finger was cut, photographed after he was arrested for being a felon in possession of a firearm.
What stands out to me here is that the reason they took him to the Aurora Medical Clinic was to photograph any marks or wounds, possible defensive wounds. And what you've actually got here is a technician with one of his fingers covering Stephen Avery's wound. So you're not getting a full picture of the size of that wound on Stephen's finger. And to me, that defeats the object of taking him there to have those pictures taken in the first place.
Well, when I look at this this wound, the wound to me is there's actually two parts to it, and I believe that it was all in the same incident. Like, it wasn't like he cut himself and then he cut himself again. It was more or less like something actually slammed down on his finger or had pinched it somehow to where it basically broke into the skin, creating this mark that we see, which is damn near almost like at a 90-degree angle if you actually look at it. Like, if his finger was actually stuck straight down and you took that roller, you would almost see a 90-degree angle, which is kind of almost similar to like a trailer hitch, like falling down on it and slamming down onto his finger.
This is clearly a significant wound to his finger. We can only clearly see parts of it, and it looks to be at least one of those lines looks to be around 3 centimeters. So it's quite, we're talking about quite a significant wound. We're not talking about a paper cut, but here there are no clear pictures of that wound.
There's another thing that stands out to me is this was taken on the 9th, and the healing process of this wound is like you can tell that it had been healed for quite some time, or that it was healed at a particular time and then broke open, basically backing Stephen Avery's claim up. I see like the wound around it, like the cut actually is like calloused over, and it's kind of like thick and hard. Which, I mean, it takes a few days to a week or more for it to heal as much as it's healed now, you know. So to me, it does favor Avery's claim, to where he basically claims that the wound had happened first initially, like almost a week prior to Treese even going missing, and then at some particular time, possibly on the 5th, as Stephen claims, where he broke open the wound again. But had this happened on the 5th, or not on the 5th, but if it happened on the 31st, when Teresa had vanished, I just it doesn't, it looks older than that to me.
Yeah, I agree.
But so the state actually tries and contend about how Avery had cut his finger during like this that Avery had cut his finger during this brutal attack against Teresa, which really didn't take place. But if you're going to go off the state's narrative and the version of events, you'd ultimately have to go off of Brendan Dassey's statement, or the false confession, as investigators painted an unlikely picture for him, in which he was fed. Brendan Dassey supposedly took the knife, at which time the knife was used to supposedly stab Teresa in her abdomen. His finger would have supposedly slid down the handle in the process and would have cut his finger. So they're trying to say that somehow this wound wasn't tied into Avery's claim, but they created a narrative to fit the wound, you know what I mean? Or fit the cut. So they're basically saying that this wound had been created somehow in this attack against Teresa.
Yeah, that was Brendan's idea of how the wound was there. And to me, it just screams law enforcement trying to make an already existing wound on Stephen fit what they were trying to imply.
But if Avery had cut his finger during the time this attack was supposedly happening, if his finger was bleeding and he supposedly cut Teresa, you would expect that there would have been some type of mixture of blood. Even experts had said that. The crime scene where both parties were actively bleeding, which would have left the mixture of blood of everything Stephen had touched until Teresa had bled off on him. So, like, according to Brendan Dassey's false confession, Mark Wiegert, Tom Fassbender, tried manipulating him that Avery had stabbed Hallbach in the stomach with a 6 to 8 inch knife, kitchen knife. At which time Stephen had told Dassey to slit her throat, which that's what Dassey claimed, that he slit her throat. Where am I at here? Slit her throat. Supposedly, this is what Brendan had told investigators. But now, Brendan actually arrived. How did Brendan actually arrive at this conclusion? Supposedly, Stephen told Dassey to cut some of her hair from what the complaint said. With Hallbach still alive, supposedly Avery had strangled her for 2 to 3 minutes while her throat was already supposedly had been slit. He then washed his hands and then reported to have punched her, yelling at her, "Shut up." That's what it says in the complaints. So if he's actually strangling her while her throat's even being slit, there's definitely still would have been a transfer of blood. You could imagine that if her throat would have been slit, his fingers bleeding on her bloody throat, like, I mean, it would have been impossible for not there to have been like some type of mixture of blood.
And for all we know, that jumper contained that mixture of blood.
Yep.
Should we move on?
Yes.
Okay. I'll leave this one to you to explain.
All right. So there's kind of a weird story or funny story, but when I first noticed this sweatshirt, I was looking at this design that was on the sweatshirt because you can only see so much of it. And while looking at it, I was trying to distinguish what it was. Couldn't really make it out, but I started looking at it, zooming in on the photo to try to get a clearer image, and I started drawing on it. Well, I started drawing what appeared to be like legs and some like muscle tone. And then I noticed what it was. So I drew this horse head on it. And then I started looking online. I couldn't find anything. Well, I shared this information with a fellow researcher by the name of Yard Dog, who happens to be one of my really good friends. She started looking online, and within a matter of a couple minutes, she actually found the item which you see in the middle, which happened to turn out to be a Budweiser sweater. We closely compared the two, and we could definitely tell that this was the same exact sweater. But I mean, I was looking for hours and hours to figure out what this thing was. And within a matter of minutes, she was able to find out exactly what it was. And it was definitely a trip.
And the photo in the middle, That's not the jumper in Stevens, is it? That's just
No,
a
no.
Budweiser jumper.
Yes. She actually looked on a place that actually sells like antiques and like retrograde clothing and anything that's basically old, you know. I mean, this is something that's kind of like a memorabilia like type site, and this is what she had found it on. Actually, this is the only photo that we were actually able to find online. We haven't found any other ones that had existed of the sweater. I mean, you got to think this is back in 2005, which I really doubt that the sweater actually was in 2005. It might have been even older than that. So,
It definitely looks like that's the sweater.
yeah, thanks to her, we were definitely able to narrow down exactly what it was that we were looking at, you know. So I gotta definitely give her credit for that.
Well, credit where it's due.
Yes.
Move on.
Yes.
Okay. Right, these pictures here. The one on the left is a close-up of the stains on the jumper you saw in the last one, folded up on top of the TV. The picture on the right is the sleeve of that same sweater draped over the TV. Again, you can clearly see the stains on it.
Yes.
The pictures in the middle, Ben, do you want to explain those and what you did and didn't do to those pictures?
All right. So all I did was change the color, like not the color, but like the saturation and the highlights. So I just kind of like made the image a little brighter. I didn't really like change the tone of the picture itself, although it does kind of look a little brighter. But while I just tried to get like a higher resolution image of what we're actually seeing here, I didn't elongate or manipulate the size or anything like that. I just basically cropped the image and zoomed in on it, and I mean it is what it is. It's exactly what you see on the sweater.
And I understand the top picture was twisted around
Yes.
as well.
Uh,
Yeah.
when I looked at these images up close, from far away, you couldn't really tell what they are or where they came from. But upon further examination, I was able to tell that these stains actually can be linked back to something or someone. The one that is on the middle top, the top photo there was the way that his finger was contorted when he pressed up against his sweater. He had it. He kind of had his finger like bent in a weird direction to where it actually imprinted onto the shirt. The other one is I mean, obviously in the right direction, but the other one was in the opposite direction. But once you flipped it around, I mean, you could definitely tell that it came from Avery's cut.
Yeah, it definitely looks like the two stains. You can see that. And I think if I was injured and bleeding, I wouldn't be thinking I had to hold my finger in exactly the same position every time I dabbed it. He could have been holding something in his other hand and just twisted his finger up in the jumper
Right.
to try and stop bleeding. So all that's been done to the middle ones is they've been zoomed in, cut to make them smaller, and the top one has been turned upside down.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and brighter. The images are brighter a little bit. You know.
Okay.
You got to give and take a little bit. You know. I mean, it It's the same wound. You know what I mean? It's just bigger. I just cropped it to where I could actually work with it and be able to compare it to
Yeah.
something, which was
Yeah.
the cut. But go ahead, you can continue. Now, if you look at Avery's cut in the middle, you can clearly tell that they're the same, basically, shape, size, and they fit like identically together. I mean, you can't really get any clearer than that. It says a lot.
It definitely
That
shows the
yes.
pattern of the cut.
Not only does it show the pattern of the cut, it also lets us know that what we see on the jumper is in fact blood, and it is from Avery's wound on his finger.
I think that it does show this. Should we show them the next bit?
Yes, go ahead.
I think this is a pretty good description. It's a very visual thing to show quite how they line up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what I did was is I took and made an overlay with both of the stains in their correct position and basically overlaid them over top of Avery's wound on his finger, and they fit identically.
I think it's fair to say there's multiple points along that where it matches the pattern of that wound.
I don't think, I mean, after looking at this, that there's any disputing exactly what's on Avery's shirt.
No. And yet, no scientific testing was done. They didn't even do the instant tests that would indicate the presence of blood.
Yes, they didn't. That's absolutely right. Now, something as important as this, I just don't understand why they thought that it wasn't necessary. And they can't tell me that they didn't collect this evidence because how could you not? How could you not collect this and just leave it there as it's sitting out in the open like that? They obviously had to have collected it and either have brought it back at a later date, or they collected it, which obviously they hidden, didn't make no reports, didn't give it no item tag, didn't show any of the attention that it well, you know what I mean,
And then just left it at the crime scene.
Right. Like we're supposed to believe that.
Yeah, I mean, what sort of cops leave blood evidence at a crime scene and don't investigate it? Doesn't speak very highly of the investigation. Well, not that any of it did, but and there's a lot more stains on the jumper than just these two, but they could have been he could have bled from one hand to the other and just wiped his hand, or it was there's a lot of stains, and it's quite a coincidence to me how much these two line up.
Right. So if a bloody sweater or sweatshirt of Avery's existed in his bedroom, then why wouldn't law enforcement collect it, catalog it, submit it as part of their evidence, or at the very least have entered it into trial as part of their evidence against Stephen Avery at trial? If they collected it, then where is it? Why is there no record of it showing that they had collected it or even had tested it? Why doesn't it exist on any evidence log sheets after discovering the stains or the blood stains? I have made the argument several times that what we are seeing on these two pieces of clothing are blood. The ones pertaining to, well, obviously the sweater and the pair of jeans. It could have been argued that law enforcement believed it to be paint from the garage, which is why they didn't use it. But how could they know it was paint without even testing it?
Yeah, if it was green or blue or yellow or any other color, then it would have been clear that it was paint. But stains like this, it would be too much of a coincidence to be painting a garage and accidentally mark yourself twice, at least twice, on a jumper in a way that exactly matched a cut you had at the time that was being torn open and actively bleeding again.
Yeah, I see a lot of people argue that it was paint from when Stephen Avery painted the garage in his trailer. Uh, the problem with that is Stephen Avery didn't paint the garage, and he did paint the trailer, but he painted the trailer not 6 months, but it was actually a year and 6 months prior to his arrest. That's when he painted the trailer. He never painted the garage. It was painted on the far side, but it wasn't even the same color as what was used on the trailer, and it was only painted from the top, probably about like a quarter of the way down. And I believe that was Raleigh Johnson that possibly had painted it, but it definitely wasn't Stephen Avery.
Okay.
But regardless, whether it was Stephen's blood or Teresa's blood, as the prosecutors should have argued, had they properly collected it and properly tested it, there was no reason why they shouldn't have collected it and tested it. It's potentially biological evidence. Something obviously nefarious is going on here. Here is a vital piece of evidence withheld and hidden from the defense, potentially exculpatory evidence at best. The only reason that comes to mind why they wouldn't log this or log it, catalog it, test it, is because they used it for planning purposes. I'm sure that the state and local law enforcement in Calumet and in Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office will get together and brainstorm some type of idea to explain their way out of this. The important thing here is there is no way out of this. You can't get out of this because, unfortunately for you, we've all got it covered. So I don't see how they can try to, create some type of fabricated log sheet or some type of bogus report as they did to Stephen the last time he was incarcerated, or as Colburn made that report there and kept it in the sheriff's office. But I don't see how they can do that this time.
No, I don't. I mean, they could say that they'd left it because they thought that it was paint, but they had those tests to detect whether things were blood, whether stains were blood, and they were using them freely inside Stephen's residence. So they had the portable testing kits there available, ready to use, and for whatever reason chose not to test that jumper, or they did test it and didn't record that and didn't record the results. The whole thing looks quite strange. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Right. I will let you explain Brady violation and I'll do the Youngblood violation, if that's okay.
Okay, so a Brady violation occurs when the evidence is favorable to exculpate. What is that? Exculpation.
Mm-hmm.
It's exculpatory or in impeachment. The evidence is neither willfully or inadvertently withheld by the prosecution, and the withholding of evidence is prejudicial to the defendant. A Brady violation is basically when a prosecution has evidence that is holds like an exculpatory value or should have been made available to the defense and they withhold it, that's constitutes as a Brady. If they have any evidence that could be used to exculpate a defendant, and they withhold it from a defendant or the defense, that constitutes as a Brady violation.
And I think here there's been so much talk about the blood in the RAV was planted. Where did it come from? The purple top bottle was debunked, I think. Well, it's still in question, but the hole in the top of the bottle, I think that's been debunked. And Stephen himself said they think that the blood was taken from his sink, again with the finger bleeding. I think this brings in an idea that the blood potentially could have come from another source as well. Stephen Avery's clothes that had blood on that were in the property. It introduces another potential source of the blood being planted, and that I think is where it fits into Brady violation.
Right.
And a Youngblood violation, as it says on here, occurs when potentially exculpatory evidence is not properly stored and is therefore destroyed by the state. What we've got here, okay, the jumper doesn't carry, as it says there, potentially exculpatory evidence. Where if that jumper had been tested and it was shown to be Stephen Avery's blood, that wouldn't prove that he didn't kill Teresa. So we can say, it doesn't fall under the potentially exculpatory evidence. But if if that was tested and or if that is blood, it was just left in the trailer. It wasn't properly stored, and biological evidence, particularly blood evidence, it's required to be kept in a fridge in order to maintain the DNA within the sample. Even if we got that jumper now, there's a good chance that if that is blood, the DNA, we could now get a sample from it. But at the time when this happened, leaving a jumper out in the open like that in the way that it was would be viewed as potentially destroying the DNA evidence held within it. And the value of this jumper is that it gives another option for where the blood could have come from. That's the weight of this jumper. Is there anything there, Ben, that you want to jump in with?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can get back into that, but go ahead.
Yep. We'll see where we are with the next one. Here we are. We're now at the end.
Well, I just wanted to say, like, the way law enforcement should act properly, you know what I mean, when they're collecting evidence, is they should obviously photograph everything that they have. And I'm not just talking like one photograph isn't going to do it, you know, because I mean they got to view it from all different types of angles, even while it's sitting there, you know what I mean, because you got to know exactly what position everything's in, to guarantee that the area hadn't been contaminated or manipulated in any way. But I mean, obviously, we see this throughout the entire case. I mean, they're actually taking evidence from Teresa's property and they're like relocating it over onto Avery's property instead of taking it to the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, you know.
You would think that was the natural place to take them, though, wouldn't you? To the crime lab. You wouldn't bring potential victims' DNA to the crime scene.
Right. It's just really astonishing to me the way that they just handled everything, and not properly handled things, and just blatantly
thrown away the rule book and done their
yes.
own thing from start to finish. You've got here, in just this alone, they had, as we've spoken about, the portable testing kits. They could have tested that jumper straight away, and then everybody would know whether it was blood or paint that was on that jumper. And I think we've shown with how closely that coincides with the cut on Stephen's finger, the chances of someone painting a shed and staining their jumper multiple times in a way that exactly replicates an injury that they have.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the statistics of that are off the chart.
But I mean, luckily for Steven and Brendan, you know, I mean, as long as there's supporters out there like me and you, that basically still have a beating heart and who are willing to fight for justice, we're never going to stop. We're going to continue the good fight and bring the sledgehammer to their front doorstep. But creating a fabricated document or anything like that to try and get out of this, there's nothing that exists. You know, I mean, there's nothing that exists that shows that they collected this. And
Yeah.
I just don't see how anybody else can argue this after watching this and still think and believe that it's something other than blood, whether it was pain or anything. I don't see it.
I'd want to challenge people to go and paint their shed and replicate an injury that they've had recently using splatter when they've painted their shed multiple times.
You know, I wonder who actually photographed it. Like actually photographed that particular picture or photographed that particular day. Who was on scene taking these photographs, because that guy, he should be thanked. You know what I mean? Because he actually captured something that probably shouldn't have been caught.
Yeah.
I mean, look how easily that thing was overlooked. It was overlooked by everybody.
For a very long time.
Yep. And I think the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, they had to have been involved. They had to have been involved in the planning of evidence, because if they would have taken this, think about how the blood could have got onto that key, or I mean, they could have used that sweater. And I mean, I'm just speculating here, but they could have used that sweater. They could have got it damped or moist, diluted it with something like saline, how they usually use for collecting evidence and stuff. But we all know by now that you actually can rehydrate blood. You know what I mean? It wouldn't really be hard for them to have taken that sweater and rubbed it to plant evidence. And actually, we do see signs of this in various locations throughout Stephen Avery's bedroom. And I mean, it could even have been used in the RAV4, you know?
Well, depending on the saturation of the blood stains, it's very possible that there were even flakes. Do you know, depending on how long he held the jumper on a wound and how saturated it was, and there's a lot there, I think. But we've got this is the first of many videos.
Well, we actually see we actually see that the Wisconsin State Crime Lab was on scene, you know. They go into Avery's bedroom. There's several photographs with them wearing, you know what I mean, white suits. They're all decked out to where, you know what I mean, they can't leave any evidence of their own behind or contaminate. But obviously, I mean, there were several officers at several times that weren't wearing outfits and weren't in regular clothing, like as in the beginning, because you actually see them walking around in Stephen Avery's bedroom without wearing anything, you know, wearing anything to cover themselves. So, I mean, look how easy they would have been. I mean, that sweater was, that sweater and pair of jeans were in the same room, pretty much at the same time when the key was found. You know what I mean? How hard of it would have been to plant Avery's DNA on that key.
And it would explain the stains on the key that you can see as well. But this has been quite an informative show, I think. And like I said, this is the first of many to come, I think.
It is, definitely.
Yep. So thanks for watching.
Yep, thank you.
We'll see you all soon.
Appreciate it.